Um, Hi, thanks everybody. It's Wesley here. This is Art Lexcia podcast. Yeah, we're episode 105, and I'm sure we're gonna stick to that. Just before we get into our guest and everything else, it's been a bit of a crazy year. Too many things happening and not happening at the same time. So we actually recorded a few episodes. This is actually the third episode I've been for. Just too many technical things from I think comparing what I was saying, I think virtually so much that I think actually why I'm Mexico now. But anyway, it's all good, man. Yeah, guys, man. Just to start, like pick up to Damian Harry for last week's episode. I thought that was really insightful. The AI Captivate, yeah, was seriously insightful. I have been looking at some of those apps that we spoke about, and yeah, I'm seriously considering moving the product design and production onto the AI platform. And also saving time and money, and I'm sure many on company can do that. So I'm definitely considering all of that because like all of these things that happens out of my control. And it's kind of messing up the productivity and so forth. But speaking of productivity, I have been very I've been working. I've been a lot of studio time this week, and the podcast with me and Asar Kevalon is actually recording our first episode next week with a couple in, I think it's either in Sao Paulo or it's in Salvador in Brazil, which is going to be really interesting. So look forward to that. I think we'll be publishing those episodes like midweek. And there's also Suzanne Corsi's Poetry Tuesdays, and I know she's at least recorded one episode so far. So I'll be tweeting and blogging all about that, as the time comes. But yeah, man, just to move on to today's guest, Kimberly Anderson. We actually recorded an episode with her, I think it was 2 weeks ago, but hey, my man, like it just, it didn't happen. When I was rendering the files, I found that I only rendered less than 8 minutes, which is ridiculous because we spoke for close to an hour. So I thought to publish an episode of 8 minutes won't make any sense. And thanks my sister for being so cool for taking time out on a Sunday, on a Sunday lunch, and to us to all our guests from abroad. Sunday lunch is like a colored thing. Yeah, you eat, you laugh, and in some cases you drink. But yeah, I'm not assuming anything here today. So Kimberly, first, thank you. You say we were talking off air. Your background looks very cool. It actually looks it looks very holiday.
It does give
very
a holiday
relaxing.
vibes.
Yeah, it does. I look like there could be a hammock somewhere in the background. And just like, yeah. So, firstly, welcome again, and thanks for agreeing to come back for
My pleasure.
recording this
My
episode.
pleasure.
Yeah, man, much love to that, my sister. Just to catch up, for our listeners we spoke about 2 weeks ago, and what we did there was we spoke a lot about the identity politics of your self-published book. And I thought that was pretty insightful because I'm also a brown person or a colored person or whatever person. I'm a South African. But so it was very interesting to sort of relate to that because as you guys know on this platform I haven't really spoken about identity politics, and there was a reason for that. So yeah, man. So we spoke about Do I Look African? We spoke about your BIBA award for 2022 and a whole bunch of other things. So let's just start, just for those guys. Let's just give a brief thingy of like where you are, where you're based, where you are, where you originally from, where you're based. Yeah, and then we'll just take it from there.
Okay.
So,
Well, my
yeah.
name is Kimberly Anderson, Kimberly Mabel Anderson.
Mabel, okay.
That's where the M comes from. This is the first and only probably interview where I'll actually reveal the second the
Mabel,
second
nice one,
name.
nice one, nice one, nice one.
Because for a good couple of years, people are asked what does the M stand for, because they understood the K, which was Kimberly, the A, which was Anderson, and they never understood the M, which is Mabel. My parents, I question their love for me when I look at that second name. Because I've heard all the jokes. I've heard that maybe it's
Yeah,
Maybelline. I've heard everything. And unfortunately, all the old people that I met, all the people that I met with the name Mabel were old. So,
it does. It
but
does
yeah,
have an old auntie vibe to it. Yeah.
exactly. And I'm from a very small farm town in KwaZulu-Natal. I come from a small town called Eshowe in KwaZulu-Natal. It's hard to even find on the map, and I love geography growing up. So to find it on the map was always a challenge. Uh, nowadays we have Google Maps where you just do this a good couple of times and you can find the space. And I was born in Durban, but spent my whole life in Eshowe from primary school, high school, married, kids, everything was there until I moved out here. And writing was always something that I just did as a hobby at first. It was just something nice, and then it became serious as I grew up. It became something that pulled me out of a lot of deep, dark spaces, and it was also something that made me more comfortable in my identity as a person. And I know we've mentioned colored politics, but I love how I never allowed that to sway who I was in my identity and finding my identity, which was a colored chick that never really fitted into any colored communities in Durban because I lived there, I worked there. But people would nitpick me out as much as I worked and I had the retail job. And there was always that stigma of, yeah, you always find colored girls working there in retail. I worked in the pavilion out in Durban. I worked in American Swiss. Shocking. I was the only colored girl here for some time. The other one left and went to the bank. So, it was a fun experience, but also how people picked me out because of how I spoke. They were like, you're not from Sydenham, you're not from Wentworth. Like, why do you speak like that? So it was always interesting. And even moving out to Joburg was interesting. So that's how we birthed the book, Do I Look African Enough? Because on a local scale, I was picked out of like, you don't speak Afrikaans, we catch you. We caught you out. And on an international scale, it was, are you sure you're African? You come from Africa? So I had fun with it. It made a good direction for writing because people limit writing. And I felt like for me, I never limited myself when it came to writing. I wrote about politics, how I feel about politics, how I dislike a lot of things with our politics out here in our beautiful country. I love that I have the freedom to say how I feel about it in our country, unlike in other places where people don't have the freedom that we have, So I've taken full advantage uh of that because I never came across a lot of writers that wrote about the things that I wrote about, that nitpicked the faults and the flaws. And I was like, oh, okay, no one really did this. I went back and did my research. I was like, okay, let me go and do it. Let's see how I'm received. But even if I'm not, who cares? I'm doing it for me. So yeah, that's basically who I am.
That's
And yeah.
thanks for that, man. In our first episode or first recording, I remember you explaining the difficult or coming from a small town, and I guess the isolation as a creative, or being isolated as a creative, and then moving to a bigger city, and like that pain, and it is a pain, sometimes actually a physical pain, that gets born out of that, and then sort of out of that your creativity came. So I thought that was an incredibly cool metaphor of art not just being you make a living off it, so got a commercial side, but it's also a hell of a therapeutic thing, sort of to face issues that were quite personal and hurt, and then actually be brave enough to put it on paper. Can you comment on that?
just like going a little bit back in what you said, it's one thing to just write. To get paid from writing or performing, wow, that's a big thing. Every time I get paid for anything when it comes to my creativity, I get excited. Uh I always get amped. I'm like, what? Even if it's for the smallest amount or the biggest amount, it never really bothers me. Which is why I still prefer, it's not that I've put myself in a box, but I've still prefer going to perform in spaces that need to hear poetry, and that kind of poetry. Going back to the message on a whole with the book is, I was so fearful even with every piece that I wrote in the book, and everyone that's close to me knows, because I was like, how are people gonna, how is anyone gonna receive this? Because I talk about even some family history of how my grandmother was abused by my grandfather, physically abused because of my mom being light in complexion, and my grandmother was very slightly darker in complexion. My grandfather was really, really fair. And he was like, oh, you gave birth to the farmer's child? Yet I'm like, did he not check what he looks like my guy? What? So she was beaten up because of that, and they stayed out past my tuba side. So if anyone knows, back in those days, you walking from the hospital, just gave birth, and you're getting hit because of how your child looks, the color. And for me, hearing those stories before my grandmother passed away fueled also the writer in me now, because I was like, I want to tell this story, but how do I tell the story? And not just her story, but also the story of being someone like me that doesn't get involved really in the politics of being colored, but is kind of like on the outside, is like, oh, I'm really mixed. Like, I can't jump on the wagon. Okay, yeah, I fall in a tribe. I'm like, I'm part Xhosa, I'm part Zulu, I'm part German, I'm part this, part that. That's why when I have a bad hair day, I'm like, I think it's the German, and
The
like I
German
always
part of me.
like exactly, like I always go to this thing when I have a bad hair day, and I'm like, yo, I think this is Shaka and Hitler, they are fighting. And somebody looked at me and they were like, what did you just say? And I was like, but that's part of my ancestry. That's part of who I am. It's part German, and it's part this, and it's part that. And I was like, I recently found out my grandparents on my dad's side were all from the Transkei. And I was like, whoa, that's cool. So when it came to politics of being colored, I never got involved with it. I got involved with the identity of being comfortable in your skin. And because there was always that thing of, you got to straighten your hair, and you got to do this, and you got to speak like that. And just because you don't speak like this doesn't make you colored enough, or just because you don't drink like that doesn't make you colored enough, or the amount of kids you have, and all these different things. So I wrote about them. You know what I'm talking about, so I went and I wrote about them. I don't know how. I went and I wrote on them, and there was one of my pieces where I clearly state that your narrative of who we are, how much we drink, how many kids we have, and or all these things about us. But then I ended off with saying, but your narration is warped, because basically, you haven't thought about how I was made. Because some of us, to be honest, was a result of rape. If you go back to the history of who we are, and that's not politics, that's just history. And we didn't ask for it. We didn't ask to be this mixture of beauty, but that's just who we are. And that's was the purpose of the book, of tackling all those things, because we've bought into and it's not just out here in South Africa, but it's internationally. We've bought into this thing of, because of how apartheid was, with colored here, blacks there, this there, everyone there. So the narrative had changed of, oh, colored people are like that. So when they meet you, they assume that thing about you, whereas now we're in a different era. But I still find it to be so. And I think I had mentioned when I was out in Alex for an event, and it's nothing against Alex, because we have our foundation there. I love being in the space because of the sense of community and how I'm welcomed. But there was one moment where somebody from Alex came and said, hey, what are you doing here? On Africa Day, where I was performing. I was one of the performing poets. And she's like, oh, what are you doing here? She pulled me aside with my group of friends. And I was like, I'm one of the performers. She says, oh, who do you represent? And her questions came, and because I've conducted my fair share of interviews over time, and I've produced, the one of the shows. I was like, no, this is weird. She came prepared for me. I was like, she probably saw me because I'm always early. So I was there like 20, I was on time, but because of African time, they were still setting up. So she saw me and I had seen her, but I wasn't focused on that. And so when she asked me those things, and I was like, I represent the Kula Morlin Foundation. We're based here out in Alexandra in 8th, in Richard Baloy. And she was shocked because of how my information was coming out. And so she's like, oh, okay. And she walked away. And when I approached my friends, when I went back to the table, they were like, Kim, who's that? Do you know her? I was like, no, I don't know her. They're like, why did she ask you? So I told them, how the conversation went. And they were like, what? They got mad, and they got upset, but it didn't faze me. It didn't shock me because I was used to being in a space where people were speaking in Zulu about me or about someone or something, and I'd laugh at the joke or I'd respond back in either English or in Zulu, depended, on my mood as well for the day. And they'd be like, what? You understand what I'm saying? So those kind of scenarios didn't surprise me, but it surprises a lot of the people around me. And then that's why I go back and say that's the reason behind the book. It's an education tool. As much as we like to say that traveling opens up the door to ignorance, breaks the door to ignorance, reading does the exact same thing. It does the exact same thing, because sometimes we say things insensitively, but we don't understand that the cultural barrier of how that person might perceive it is different to what you're trying to understand. Now you find yourself in this debate where that person's offended because of what you said, but you don't understand that culturally for them that was wrong. So it's that's the beauty of do I look African enough? Because there's no one that's a specific race that can say they don't understand the pieces in this book.
So if I must get what you're saying is that as much as it was therapeutic in writing about your experiences, it was also a way of educating people who's going to read it about how diverse. I think that's pretty interesting. For a bunch of things, the first thing is that, or the first thing that comes to my mind is that as artists based, as artists living on the continent, our creative industry is not that diverse and it's not that huge. I mean, you just on sales numbers, etc., money, basically, where you can be a little nuanced. Where for example, if you take like the lady who wrote Harry Potter, it'll be very difficult to conceptualize a series of books like that based in some township in South Africa, because your reality dictates basically what you conceptualize, and I think that's pretty interesting. And just to add another point on top of that, I want to put another medium. I'm a visual artist by trade, so to speak. The first few images that I did, and I'm talking like in my early late teens or something like that, was sort of pseudo self-portraits, but it was like action, because I used to dig what's this cartoon? Yeah, I used to dig comics as a light teen, and I used to have these like sort of action stuff. And many years later, looking at it, I'm like, oh shit. So maybe my conscience was saying, yo, I'm actually bigger, louder than the so I don't represent, like, subconsciously I was representing myself as somebody who's literally bigger than my them surroundings. I think that's pretty interesting. Let's just jump, like, when you were saying that also traveling is also, and I agree. I agree that traveling also sort of breaks down those identities. Like, anyway, but you get it. But you also mentioned reading. Yeah, who were you reading growing up? Who did you like, and whose poetry, whose writing moved you and shaped your?
To be honest, and I think I had mentioned it when we tried to do this before, the only form of poetry that I knew growing up was Shakespeare. Thank you to Mrs. Pillay, my English teacher, for forcing me to read in the class every session that we had with her for English. But that was the only poetry that I was exposed to at that time, because as we mentioned, like Ishawi was a very it was closed off to many things.
Can
It
relate.
was closed off to a whole lot of things. Like we had one more. Even up to now we still have one more, but like we never had a McDonald's, we never had a lot of things, like, and it's no diss to McDonald's, but as a kid, we would have liked to have something like that, other than KFC or Chicken Licken. But it's a very small town, and it'll tell you when we close to places like Yonkandla, Gingindlovu, Mandeni. It's very, very small. It's not like Richards Bay. So I was limited to a lot of things, even when it came to technology, even when it came to the first cell phone, because I was talking with my daughters about that the other day. I was like, wow, I grew up at a point where there weren't even cell phones. And the first cell phone I ever saw was at Ericsson. It was blue and it flipped. And they were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, it had an aerial. You have to put the aerial up. And they were like, I don't know what you're talking about, because my brother was a matric and he has pictures with them. And I laughed at him because I didn't know what that was at that point. But that was the unfortunate but fortunate thing about Eshoy, because I say unfortunate because there's a lot we could have learned. There's a lot that we could have harnessed when it came to our creativity. But it's fortunate in the sense of we learned a lot about community, and it taught me a lot about observing people's behavior, observing and enjoying nature, the gardening side of things and all these other things that we learned growing up. So when I moved out here and I started tapping more into poetry, I still didn't have a favorite poet. And there was something I said last year, was the year before, in another interview, and someone asked, who's your favorite poet? And I was like, me. And it might have come off a bit prideful to say, but I'll still go back to saying me, because I don't want to bank too much on. I admire a lot of people. I admire many poets out in Africa, South Africa, internationally. I admire a lot of people. But at the end of the day, I still want to be my own best, because I feel like sometimes when we idolize people too much, we aim to be like that person so much that we lose sight of who we are and our character and the things we enjoy, because I've heard some poets that like your Maya Angelou, and then I've heard them recite pieces and they sound just like Maya Angelou. And then I've heard some poets that like, some amazing poets out here, like, your Clear and Soli and, all these other poets out here. And then I've heard them perform and they sound almost just like Soli, or they sound just like Clear. And I'm like, but okay, the best advice I can give you is sound like you, because they don't sound like somebody else. They also just sound like them, so that's what I say for me. But I enjoy reading on a whole. Reading is very good, but right now I'm still dissecting my own book. I'm still dissecting my own book, because the things that I've written about, I'm still trying to sink in that I actually wrote them. Because I feel like when we write, we go into, how many different amazing artists like your Da Vinci and all these other people that were said to be mad. I was in my madness when I was writing the book, because that's when I was at my height of depression and anxiety. I'd be writing poems when I'm having an anxiety attack, and I'm there, hardly breathe. Exactly, you can hardly breathe.
How would you concentrate?
I don't know. I was crying and my hand was shaking, and I'm just like.
So you write with a pen and you won't type?
I would write. My best writing that I had done was with a pen, and then there were moments when I couldn't even write with my pen. Then I would just grab my phone and press the record on the record app on my phone, and I would record pieces like I'd mentioned. One of the pieces was the labor pains of Africa. That piece was basically me just taking my phone and doing it, because I don't know about everyone, but sometimes with the creative's mind, my creative mind, it flows so fast. Everything is coming in so quick, and that's what contributed to the insomnia, because I wouldn't sleep at times because there's so many poems running through my head, but my hands and my mouth weren't getting them out fast enough, and my brain couldn't handle what my heart is feeling. So it's like, there was just that fight constantly. And
No, I know what you're saying.
managed to,
I know what you're saying.
some I managed to get them out and record them verbally. And then some I managed to not get out. Some of the best pieces are still written in my head at this point. The ones that actually found their way out, I'm still surprised, because also we have this thing where we want to perfect. We always want to have a perfect piece, or we want to have that perfect this, or I don't know about everyone, but I always do that. I'm always my biggest critic. When I go back to my performances, I look at it. What did I do wrong? The same with my pieces. Okay, go back and touch it up. There's some pieces I wrote 2017, and I went back and looked at them in 2019. I was like, I need to change some things, so that's what it's like.
That's actually quite fascinating. A bunch of things, two things, bunch of things. The fact that I would say your core of your writing was shaped actually is actually a direct, or let me rephrase it, that the core of your writing is actually shaped directly by your surroundings, and by the sort of lack of say cultural void, and then the creative. What I've talking to so many artists over the years, that an artist is made, or an artist is born. You can't front it. So you either have it in you or you don't. You can't front it. And those that front, the rest of us can see. I think that's pretty. I think that's pretty interesting. I think you'll actually grow. Oh wait, just this. Let me not go there yet. Let me just get back to the other point you were saying about writing when with being anxious. I think a lot of graphic designers and web developers who's chasing deadlines can probably relate to. Your mic is off.
Oh, there was a plane.
It was intentional. Oh, okay. I thought it was something else. No. Like as I was saying, to write in a very anxious. I think that must be interesting to actually do a case study on that to see how the words eventually come on the paper. The sort of the I guess the personality of the words. It will actually be interesting to see how the actual handwriting looks. Does the hand, is there a shakiness? Is the lines more bold? Is it fat? Because it's yeah, man. I write. I have like a piece of paper with multiple colors and multiple. So with every episode, I've got here at the bottom of this is it's just full of paper. So
that's the
and I've
proof
got a
that
bunch
we
of
are
markers.
writers. That's the proof.
I've got all these color markers here. So every idea. And it eventually takes on almost a language on its own, and has a personality on its own. So that's why and some of this probably was written when I was a bit anxious and a bit stressed and a bit whatever, and a bit happy or whatever. So it definitely, so that's why I think that'll actually be quite interesting to explore. I think on a separate episode. Definitely, I think that's pretty interesting. Okay, let's move on from there, man. So we spoke of something that really resonates with me, and just for the listeners. So Kim, you are published by a lady from the US, correct?
Yes.
Where about exactly? Just so we can.
The book was published in New York. She's based in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay. Okay. So how does that work actually? Is a company based in New York?
No, we the books were rolled out to publish at a big publishing house out there, out in New York. Yeah, that's, I think also it was good for us, because also we forged nice things with it, because before my book even touched African soil, it was part of the New York Poetry Festival out last year, September. So the moment my book got published, it was already out there for on display at the festival. So that was one of the benefits.
That's a now I sort of wanna unpack that for. Okay, we got that 10 minutes in here. Okay, so let me just finish train of thought here. So what I find super interesting, and like I said earlier, like we spoke about, touched the briefly of it, is why local based artists find it easier and sometimes more convenient, and in some cases financially better to work with guys who's based abroad than based locally. And let me just add my 2 cents on that. Um, yeah, local based publishers, art galleries, music company, music record labels, and so forth, can be quite formulated and quite conservative in being formulated. In other words, they stick to a winning formula because that's what makes them money. And that's what makes their business work. Because as we all know, like the system works that the product, in your case, the publisher will take the words, and they have an existing market and they know that these words will sell to this market. So there's very little room for experimentation. And even if the artist is tries to experiment, there's always there's a formulated type of experiment, and that you see across every single genre of music, which is why I think the amapiano genre is so massive, because it's incredibly formulated and it's easy. It's easy. You just take 1, 2, 3, 4 elements, put it in the studio, get a hook, and then you have a hit. And the same could, yeah, that's it, the same can be said. I also spoke to, I think it was 2 weeks ago, to a documentary maker about a similar concept with documentaries, and it was the same thing. So the people who's throwing money behind it wants their money back. And just another point on that, which I find fascinating, is that you say you did approach local based guys. It's just that the language, whatever was spoken by the international guys, worked through. And what we also spoke about the first time we tried to do this was that what I saw with your book was that it was really packaged for an international audience. Even the title, because you look at the title, you look at the cover art. For somebody I can understand, say for example, somebody in Brazil, I will look at it, say, okay, this person looks like he went to Africa, so they make all the deductions in the head, and then they read the words, but how they impact by the words. So that is actually quite fascinating. That opens up. Um, I think we must actually be a bit critical on local based. But I think if I'm a bit too critical, I just might lose more clients, and I can't afford to do that so early on in the year. So, my sister, what I suggest we do is, because we've got 6 minutes, it's still way too short to give you any form of answer. So, I'd like to know your views on all of that. Sort of like how you, I guess the issues of being of getting word first locally, and then how you accepted American, how you were packaged. I'm very interested in that, because well, I mean, it's too early to tell, but it'll be interesting to see, let's say 5 years from now, is how do they package it now? Is it still going to be beneficial? Is there still way to grow, and so forth, and to expand, and in what directions? It'll also be interesting to know what else you can write about, because yeah, as you guys know, it's pretty crazy out there, and they're killing people. So if you're based in South Africa, we're recording this episode just before Valentine's Day. There was another unfortunate death, and artists don't even have money, but they need to have bodyguards. So how crazy is that? And I was actually, oh, okay. I was gonna voice. I read something on Facebook yesterday that was more so upsetting to me, because there's a police running around on Facebook shutting down everybody's opinion who doesn't agree with it. But I think we'll deal with that also in a future episode. And I'm gonna go after them this year. I think I've got nothing to lose. So, my sister, I'm gonna shut down the session. I'm gonna send you another link, and then we'll just pick it up after
All
that.
right, no problem.
Salute. Okay, there we go. And we're back. So Kim, like we said earlier on, yeah, what's your take on what we spoke about earlier on moving to an international-based publisher, being marketed and being packaged as an international-based poet versus locally?
It's a hard question to answer because everyone that is in my very close circle knows that I'm always that person canvassing for local artistry and local this and local produce. I'm that person like local vegetation, like everything. I'm for it, even up to going and learning how to grow my own vegetation to some point now, where I never asked for it. It's one of those things where, as you mentioned, there's the wannabes, where they are always trying to overcompensate for something that's not even there or something that they don't have. And that was kind of, for me, it was the opposite because I downplayed myself. I downplayed what I did. I downplayed my writing. There was that person, but I was nitpicked out of a space of a whole lot of people where someone was like, okay, you're good enough after approaching so many people. And for me, it was a thing of, wow, somebody so far thinks I'm good enough at what I'm doing. Whereas locally, my fingers had been burnt by people that want me to write in a certain way and want me to speak in a certain way and all these other amazing things, because who said I wanted to be, and that's something I always say is, who said I wanted to be a Shakespeare? What if I wanted to be a Wordsworth? What if I wanted to be the people's poet? Because when you look at the history of poetry, he was not the most sang about guy. I never ever read or dissected any of his pieces growing up in high school, but he was known as the people's poet, for the everyday person. And so I was like, I want to be that person, because I was questioned about from somebody that, and this is what I did in my early stages of writing. I never sent my pieces to people that were poets or creatives to dissect or give their input. I sent it to an everyday person because I wanted to know how it made them feel, not necessarily of the pros and cons and the highs and the lows and the words and all these other things. No, I wanted to know how it makes somebody on an everyday level feel. Does it make you feel good? Does it make you think of something? Does it trigger a memory? And I was like, that's what I want to do with my writing. And so when I was scrutinized by people within our circle of writing locally, I was like, wow, they don't make me feel good. Writing makes me feel good. Writing's not supposed to feel like a job. It's not supposed to, yes, I know people do it for a job, but I don't want it to feel like that. I want to enjoy it.
It's a job.
But it must be something that you enjoy, because when I studied for teaching, I studied for teaching. Yes, I found ways of enjoying it. But at the same time, it was just a thing of, I'm doing it for money. That's what teaching was. It was a thing for money. But when I got into poetry, it was like, I'm doing it just because, because. So when I was on Instagram and going on Instagram lives and working on my craft after being stumped down so many times, hearing that I had the voice for poetry and I needed to work on the words and all these other things. So I went and I worked on it, and COVID hit, worked on my delivery via social media. So when the ones that were trying to tell me how to do it crashed because they didn't know how to conform to what was happening on the digital world, I grew in the digital world, and I loved it. I loved every part of it because I was like, I can perform on a Zoom and I don't have to see those people ever again in my life, and I came across people, stumbled across Facebook, and there was someone that had posted something in a poetry group of a link, and I was checking on the time when I logged into it, and I was like, what? This is at 3 a.m.? And the first one was actually with a poet by the name of Breeze. He's a very, very, very amazing slam poet out in the US. He's won regional and international champ on, I think, more than one occasion. So it was awesome when stumbling across a room that has greats, because there were big names in that spaces. There were poets from Baltimore, there were poets from New York, there was so many different people in that space, and I was like the small fish, and I was like, wow,
this is what it's like. And I'm not a slam poet, but slam poetry excites me. It winds me up, because, it just gives you that excitement. And even though we are those poets that not necessarily are pen poets, but we spoken word poets, but we can flip through the two. And hearing how they deliver stuff and how aggressive they were with things, I was like, okay, I don't want to do that, but could do it if I wanted to. But then I kind of found the bridge of the highs and the lows of like having a slam poet voice in some parts of my pieces and then digressing again and going back again. I was like, oh, I love this, and now one of my good friends, Ashley Moyo, she's a slam poet out here in Joburg, and she's one of my good friends. I admire what she does, but I could never, so with going onto those social media platforms and not saying anything bad about local. But the thing is when COVID hit, the platform that I was a part of at some point, they were promoting more international than local. And that's what broke my heart, because I was like, we here, hello, we here, hi. Because I worked with a lot of poets here in South Africa. I can name them, I can pull them out, and they were just like, they were disheartened too, because they were like, we also want to record our stuff and get it on those platforms. We also want to do this, and we've submitted. I was like, did you submit? Because I'm that person that when I hear about something, I'm sending the link to everyone. And when I'd get people that have said, I've sent the link and they didn't play my stuff, or they didn't even reply, they didn't say anything to me, it hurt. So I was like, I'm not even going to refer my people there anymore. My circle of people with poets, and it's a lot of people. I was like, I'm not sending them there anymore. Why not just go and make my own space? And why not just do my own thing? And then that's how I stumbled across Marissa Prada and a bunch of other awesome, amazing poets from New York, poets from Texas, and also Canada, and different places out in the US as well as UK. So I was like, wow, I caught the bug. I caught the bug. But as I say, I didn't ask for it. It's just one of those things that where you say, you don't plan the journey, but sometimes when it comes along the way, you just, okay, let's go with it. I come from the small town where I didn't know about this stuff. Wow, but might as well. You never know. So you never know. Got me a publishing deal. So that was my never know.
Very interesting. So very, very interesting, man. So would it be safe to say that you are definitely let me say you are a poet, you are a product of a post-COVID world, of a digital, like your poetry received, or where you are now as a poet, you rode the virtual gigs wave. So you like a product of post. That is super, super, super interesting. That's fascinating. For a bunch of reasons. Firstly, we've been covering that extensively on this platform on how artists have been adapting to that. Just to give you some perspective, I want the old way of doing it is to host a session, as you know, and to invite people and to press 12, 13, 20, however many people in a room, and you're hoping that one of them is an influential fella. That's why you got to keep doing gigs constantly. I sort of come through that thing, and there's a vibe that's like I wouldn't change it for anything. But the frustration between that is, I'll give you an example. Many years ago in Melville, we got excited because we were doing a show, and there was just some white dude that just stood up and was talking on his phone. And some of us were getting excited and saying, "Oh fuck, maybe this guy is calling his agent, calling somebody." And maybe he was just calling a lift, or making sure the stove was turned off. But we just got excited because he looked like he was important. And I found out like over time there's a lot of things like that. So there was a lot of hit and miss. In other words, a lot of that. But it was fun. It was good fun in many ways. But what you're doing or in a postcode world, which I find fascinating, is that these guys will be logging onto these sessions. These are people in the know, the people taking time out from across the globe. So your audience is like that is the that is the go-to audience, which is also why, I started the podcast eventually, because I want to, I want to talk to a specific group of people. So that's fascinating. And I'm actually like big up. Well, if I had like sound effects now, I'll do the sound effect thingy and this and that, because I think that's dope. That's dope. Also, I mean, like, Caesar, my dear friend, I mean, she went through the traditional route, and now she's picked up eventually by Botsotso. And now there's also, my screen is freezing. So that's probably a network issue. What I've noticed with traditional publishers in South Africa, the process is also, it's also time consuming. It takes forever and so forth. So if you were saying you were starting to jam, post COVID world, how long did it take for you when you did your first session to where the book was published to the award? Can you just explain to us that journey? So how did they, or rather, let me be more specific. How were you accepted? What part of the poetry, or what part of you, and how did they say, okay, boom, we're gonna publish this, and like, how did your life change after you won? And you can tell us about the award as well.
The first session opened my eyes to the endless possibilities, because there was once I wrote that poetry is my drug of choice, and that is totally it, because the bug had hit me. When people used to always talk about when something hits them, and they started chasing that rush or that feeling after that. It's like, nah, this is just an adrenaline junkie. But I became like that. I became a poetry junkie in the sense of I was chasing every session that I could possibly get my hands on, because before COVID, I would go to sessions out in Melville as well. It's just with that, I didn't have much guidance. I wasn't getting much motivation or just, that thing to say, okay, you're doing the right thing, but just maybe try work on this, constructive criticism, because I'm for that. It doesn't matter how many books I write and how many awards I win, I'm still going to be open to criticism and decide if it's good or if it's just something that I need to throw one side and be like, that's just out of line. And so I didn't get that. And it wasn't just me, it was a couple of us. And so we branched off and we did our own thing, which was, and I mentioned, was hashtag I'm Poetry Africa, which hashtag I'm Poetry _Africa, as Lorenzo Hendricks always wants to be technical. But that's how we formed that baby, because we were the rejected. We were the ones that were never told. And then when we came together, we would nitpick each other's pieces and be like, you need to change this line. Find a way of rephrasing that line. Dig deeper. Or we'd be so honest to a point where it's like, I feel like you're sugarcoating this. Where we'd say to each other, like, I feel like you can dig deeper here. Or your piece is too short. I feel like it shouldn't have ended that way. I feel like there's more that you have to say. Or, it's perfect. You should have ended it there. So what I needed, I ended up getting because of COVID. Because we had discussed that. And so it started with the performances. Then we birthed I Am Poetry Africa, that celebrated 2 years last year of virtual sessions, and we're actually going to have one now in later on in the afternoon.
You should invite me to one of them. I'll you.
No, you can definitely come through, because it's an open mic session. And even with that, I didn't just hog the space when I was accepted on an international scale. What I found was, okay, so they're accepting me. So if they accept me, that means I have to accept everyone that comes with me. My whole hashtag I'm Poetry Africa family is coming with me. So when they would have virtual sessions, like my Marissa Prada, which is my publisher, she'd say, okay, we're going here, we're going there, we're in India, we're hopping all over the world with different poetry sessions in a weekend. Maybe I'm hitting about 4 or 5 in a day, or in a weekend, maybe 3 today, another 2 tomorrow, or 3 today, 3 tomorrow, and it was hectic. I know it caused strain on my family, but also with this journey, as you have to understand, it comes with also sacrifice. I had to sacrifice family time. to do these things. You know, to do the things that we enjoy that don't pay us a thing. I didn't know that my book is gonna end up being where it is right now. I didn't know that somebody would believe in me enough to say, Kim, I'm submitting your book for this award, that award, and I think we're going to bag this award. And you know what? I think your book is good enough to win an award, even for like on a Grammy level. And I was like, this, you know, this person's gassing me up.
Yeah.
And before I even finished my sentence, we won the first award. And I was like, okay, let me shut my mouth and let you do what's best, because you know what's best for me at this point when it comes to the marketing of this. And I just trusted her. And as I said, it was unfortunate that I didn't publish here. And merely off that, nobody got the time to really read the manuscript. Or maybe it's because I didn't go the normal route, you know, where they heard my name on the street, you know, or gain that respect on a street level. You know, it was just on a virtual level, to a point where I'm not posting, but to a point where now if I go onto a Zoom or if I go onto a Instagram live, I get picked out and be like, oh, that's KMA. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. You know, yeah, I'm here. Like, yeah, you know, even on Clubhouse. And I think that's the thing, is we've limited ourselves to just down the street or just that room. And once you just don't limit yourself to that, the possibilities are endless when it comes to writing poetry. There's Clubhouse. Clubhouse has rooms every day where you can go and perform those pieces and perfect how you sound, and then go out into that same hall or that space in Melville and go and perform that piece that nobody heard you performing Clubhouse. It's just that you were using that as a trial period. And that's how I looked at the virtual sessions. I was like, oh, this is where I practice. And now I have to go out into the world and I have to do it. So when we had our space out in Alex, which is Kula, I was like, ooh, let's go. You know, I was performing pieces where I infused music and poetry and seeing how the crowd felt it, if they feel it as good as the virtual crowd. And I enjoyed it. And I still chase that rush, but it's different to actual sessions and virtual sessions. There is a difference between the two.
Yeah.
You know?
Fascinating stuff, man. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating. I like the way you say you just won the first award. I like the confidence in that. And congrats to that. I know that if I must analyze it really sharply, like just to have that in your vocabulary and to come out, the confidence is clearly grown, which is good. A lot of artists, local based artists, don't really, I wouldn't say don't really get it, but I don't think they really trust the system. They don't really trust. I'm assuming, yeah. Let me rather just put a pause before I've said a whole bunch of people. But I know that because this post-COVID world, and a lot of guys really jumped on it. Most guys was in the studios, you know, putting together work, and as soon as everything opened up, they just went back to where everything was, because there's security in a form of comfort for it. Yeah, it's comfort, but you understand what I'm saying. So to be a sort of a pioneer, so to speak, in this post-COVID world is dope. I'm sure in a few years, months, there'll be almost like a subcategory for guys like yourself and others. And I'm sure your numbers is also pretty more, but more impressive, because one unfortunate thing, and this is issue we have in South Africa, and you can read all these nasty, cruel stats of how few people read and how few people have access to books. My take on all of that is that this is where your future lies. You have to get your stuff on here. Yes, the library system, the bookstore system, and so forth is necessary, but they need to evolve, and they're not. And that's why they are falling behind. That's why the youth is out of touch with these spaces, because what these spaces are actually housing or showcasing is not what young people want, and they are not evolving. And I think that is problematic in South Africa. Which is why it's cool to talk to people like yourself, who's confident about this world, and who, of course, is successful, because that's the big part of it. So much so big up to all of that, man. So we sort of in the latter part of everything. So there's just two more things I want to cover. You were saying, or rather, your book got published when, last year? Do I Look African? When was it published? Last year. So what's the how can I say? What's the marketing thingy? So where are you performing it? Where can people get hold of it? What is how else are you marketing and where? And if somebody is based in wherever in South Africa, because quite a few people that listen to this, that will listen to this podcast is based here, especially around Johannesburg, Kimberly, Cape Town, so forth. The major centers. They will listen. So, where can they get hold of it? And yeah, one question at a time.
Locally, you can contact me for a book because I still have a few left. As I mentioned, this is my first book. We only printed a limited amount of copies. The second book, the third book are both in process. So some
The
of the
second
books
book
as
as in
well.
a second or third anthology, like.
No, they're still getting worked on. There's pressure though on me for submitting the manuscripts. I'm just taking my time on them
A
because
year
I'm like,
after
I don't.
doing your first one. Sure.
Sorry.
A year after you did your first book, you already got pressure for the second. Wow.
Yep. Yep.
I
So
don't think I've heard that too often.
yep. If
That's
this is why
interesting.
it is very interesting. It's something I also didn't expect. My publisher, when she sends me a message after a piece that I wrote, one of the pieces was a new one this year is When They Come For Me, which is basically like a backlash piece of some things that were said after this book was published. And it was also a prompt on Clubhouse. Shout out to people on Clubhouse, the poetry family and community on Clubhouse, because that prompt comes from that was When They Come For Me. So I wrote a piece on that, and I found so many poets that were like, we wrote 3, 4, 5 poems just based on When They Come For Me. So that when my publisher heard me perform that piece on a Instagram live, testing it out, and I just fresh out of the oven. I had just finished putting the finishing touches on that, and I had just put it out there and fumbling through some of the words because I had just finished writing it. And she's like, we should definitely write a book with that title or based on that. And I was like, this woman, I was also just like, you can't be putting this pressure on me. Knowing her, yeah. But when it comes to the book, you can contact me for international purchases. You can go to www.redoregreenbooks.com.
Red or green
And
books.
Red or Green Books, like read, READ, Red or Green Books.com. This is, let me see if I can find the logo on here. It'll look more or less like this. So there will be the logo of it. And you can purchase my book on there, as well as see maybe some of the events that I might be a part of virtually with that platform. Local events, we're still putting together the schedule of what's happening. I've been hosting a lot of events more than performing at some of the events. And other than that, if anyone wants to know where I'm going to be, they can follow me on Instagram on Kimberly_KMA or on Turning Pain _into power, because there'll always be something posted on my story, as well as, like, as I mentioned, with the I Am Poetry Africa event. So that's where people can find it, as well as I am giving about 4 books away, donating to local libraries or schools that will have them. So if anyone is interested in these books within South Africa, they must let me know, and I will donate 2 or so signed copies to your institution.
Let me just come in. Let me just give you some advice, so to speak. You need to contact the National Library. They're based in Pretoria. You can find their number on their website. What they do with local-based publishers, when you apply for your ISBN number, you must give them 5 copies, which they send to the different national libraries so they can archive it. It's sort of mandatory for local-based publishers. So there is actually a demand for that. With libraries, to get into local libraries, I guess it depends on what part of the country are, but there are specific people that you should talk to on that. but I would start off with the National Library to get into those 5 books. One of the well, it's very I would highly recommend that that's your first stepping stone. My sister, I'd love to read. I'd love to hear one of your pieces, man. Is it can you a good friend of mine, he's a very well-known poet, told me once that a poet must always have a poem like in your pocket, like if someone say you're a poet, you can just say, just take it out and just perform. I like that. I like that. I always thought that's also a good. Anyway, I like that a lot. Do you have one that you could just hoy us there quickly?
Yeah,
Please, please,
I'm
please,
always
please
like
go
that.
for it.
Like
Go
I
for it.
put my
Go for it.
marker. You can see my marker was already there.
Literal marker. Yeah. Tell us what piece you're gonna read and.
This piece is entitled Love Was Once a Color. It's on page 32 of my book. Still feels a bit weird to say which page it is, but yeah. It's entitled Love Was Once a Color, and you can
Go for it.
give me your point when you're
Yes, I
done.
will.
In 1949, love looked either white, black, Indian, or other. Other referring to the mixed race brain mensa were the names we were once given before finally classed as colored. Love had no specific taste or class. It just had to be within the invisible lines that referred to other as an abomination, and just by taking a glimpse across that line would lead to assassination. Love's options were either tall or short, and fat or skinny, but never blonde hair and blue eyes, dark skin and thick hair, red lips and tan skin. Love was once a color more than it ever was a feeling. Love was once a death sentence or a bullet in the back of the head. Love was once he made you do it, right? When white girls got caught between the sheets with a man not on her side of the fence. Love was once, let's run away together to a place we could call our own, when the boss's son found love in the streets of Gomorrah instead of Santon. Love was once babies made in Africa and delivered in secret in the UK, left without an identity. See, my grandmother once shared how my grandfather refused to believe that my mother was his due to her light eyes and gorgeous complexion. I guess he forgot to check his reflection in the river when he washed his face that morning, because out of all the 3 children that he shared with her, my mother had his hazel brown eyes and fair skin. But because love was once a color and hers resembled the farmer, drunk with rage, his fist celebrated his second daughter's birth. Some days later, he finally came to this realization that her features had. Love may have been preached on pulpits, but it was never practiced. It was the delusion of thinking that God was white and therefore seen pure, idolized and feared, and the merging of 2 races held faces that even love looked back at proudly, but never had taken the responsibility for. See, though those lines are now crossed, we still break eggs at the sight public. We boast to our friends about the white guy, our family members dating, and how their kids' hair would never need straighteners, just like ours did, to fit the mold of being what society called decent. And even dating a fair colored chick, somewhat seen as a badge of honor or trophy won. Our minds seem to still think of love as a color more than it is a feeling.
I like it. You got some very strong. I used to illustrate. Well, I still do, but not as much I used to do in the past. I used to illustrate a lot of poetry. Yeah. So I used to always pick up on like very graphic, like images in the poem, and I take the reference between love as a color, and I used it as like for the I dig it. Yeah. I liked it. Yeah, man. I guess that's more Caesar's thing. Needs to sort of and unpack more of it, and maybe also just to read. One thing I really enjoy, which I find quite poignant, if you ask a poet, sorry, to read something of them, is what poem they choose. I think that, you know, the fact that you show that also pretty, I think it's also, it says it's more like what you're not saying than what you are saying. If that makes any sense, I thought that was very cool. I like the and also the fact that you started with the in 1949 love with color, something like that. That's dope. That was pretty cool. Kimberly KMA Anderson. Okay, KMA sounds very hip hop. It sounds very 1990, like old school hip hop. I'm sure there was an MC with a similar name. Or I'm thinking of KLF. But there was it sounds. You should maybe if you're in a branch and do more street type shit, you know, get like a really graffiti-esque logo. I think KMA, it'll look also good like on as graffiti. Already I can see shapes there with a name. Kimberly KMA Anderson. This
Please note, if you see any
was
graffiti
great.
with my name, it will not be.
This was really cool, man. This was really insightful. I really
I
insightful.
enjoyed this.
You are definitely the first person that I spoke to on this platform that has been sort of a product, so to speak, of a post COVID world. And I think it's fascinating. Please keep me up to date with. Hello? What the fuck just happened? Okay, this thing just went off there.
As long as it's still recording.
Fucking technology, nah. I think my laptop's also telling me that the session is done. Or there's again this load shedding nonsense. It must be another tower here. So we are looking to get a generator. And for my listeners, as soon as I get that done, I'm sure I'll be way more efficient. But my sister, thank you very much. Let's wrap this up, man. You say you are available on all the major platforms, so it's Facebook. Are you on Twitter?
No. I have an account, but I don't. I'm not big into Twitter. I'm not big into social media unless it's for poetry. Other than that, I just love putting my phone one side and just writing or other things. But yeah, you can. Kimberly KMA Anderson is everywhere on Facebook, on Instagram. Those are the two platforms. If you want to know anything else that we're doing, can message me. Give me a call as well as one of those platforms and can work as well and see what we're doing.
For sure, man. And to the other listeners, like if you gather more information as well, you can always get hold of me and I'll forward it through to Kimberly. And remember, guys, we're available on all the platforms. So we also have Patreon. I forgot to mention at the beginning again. But we are Patreon creators as well. We're on Afropod. Check us out there too. That's an African-based platform. And like Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, where else? It's more like where we're not. So if you just run Art Lexcia, you'll find us anywhere. Remember, please like, subscribe, and comment to this channel. And my sister, thank you very much once again for giving us your time and for giving us your work. I'll be in touch with you with regards to when this episode will go live. It'll be in a few weeks' time though, because we have a little buffer. But I will let you know beforehand. And Clubhouse, just the last question. Clubhouse is clubhouse.com. Or is it just Clubhouse? Or is
it's an app. Clubhouse is just the app.
Okay.
You can find
I can get it off the Play Store. Okay.
Yeah, you can get it off the Play Store. If you find me on Clubhouse with this name, I'll ping you into all the rooms and all
spaces. Okay, for sure. I'll get it down.
That are there as well.
Fantastic, man. Fantastic. I definitely want to check that out. Yeah, and your publishers Read or Green Books as an READ or Green Books. So check it out there too, guys. And once again, my sister, enjoy spending the time with your family for the rest of the day. And keep writing, and I'll be in touch. Thank you very much.